Welcome to the second part of our discussion on safety in the workplace. Now we are going to discuss the different occupational health hazards. As I have mentioned in the previous video, in order to create an occupational health promotion program, the industrial physician, industrial hygienist, and safety engineer must work together in terms of gathering data, analyzing data, and coming up solutions on how to design a holistic occupational health promotion program. Now, in order for them to be accurate in their work, there has to be enough data about the profile of their workers, and data about the workplace. Now, in terms of the workplace, there are different hazards existing in the workplace. These hazards must be identified so that appropriate preventive measures will be designed properly. Tsaka class, we really have to identify these hazards so that we can prevent these hazards from happening, so that we can protect the health and life of the different workers. So in the succeeding slides, we will be discussing the different types of occupational health hazards. Let us first start with their definition. Physical hazard pertains to environmental factors that can cause harm without necessarily touching them. Chemical hazards pertain to hazardous chemical substances that have acute or long-term negative health effects. Biologic hazards are infectious agents or hazardous biologic materials produced by organisms that present a risk or potential risk to the health of humans, animals, or environment. You will know if it is a biologic hazard because of this symbol, the biohazard symbol. Mechanical hazard results of powered or manual use of tools, equipment, or machinery and plant or planta. Ergonomic hazards are a result of physical factors that can cause musculoskeletal injury. Psychosocial hazards are associated with work design, organization, and management. Psychosocial hazards may also affect psychological health or the ability of the worker to take part in a work environment with other colleagues. Now, we are going to discuss all of these hazards one by one in the succeeding slides. But before we proceed to that, please try to identify the different example of hazards that I will be presenting in this slide. Poor posture. What type of hazard is this? Yes, ergonomic hazard. How about acetylene gas? Correct. Chemical hazard. Workplace violence. Yes, it's psychosocial hazard. Constant loud noise. Of course, it's a physical hazard. Unguarded moving parts on a machine. Mechanical hazard. And lastly, plants. Halaman. Biologic hazard. Okay, so let's start with the first. Physical hazards. Temperature. Of course, class, who would want to work in an area that is too hot? 'Di ba? Maging katulad tayo nito sa worker na nasa ating picture. Una, nakapagsuot pa siya ng office attire. And then dahan-dahan, kasi mainit, hinubad, eh, yun nga, hanggang sa wala na talaga siyang damit. 'Di ba? Kung kayo yung worker, would you want to work in a place that is so hot, tapos closed pa talaga, walang proper ventilation? Or kung kabaliktaran naman, too cold, would you want to work in an area na very cold? If it is too hot, there is the risk for hyperthermia. If it is too cold, there is the risk for hypothermia. Now, if it is too hot, di ba, pwedeng mag-result into hyperthermia. Now, the risk for hyperthermia kasi, if it is not addressed, it will result to heat exhaustion. And pag hindi pa talaga ma-address itong heat exhaustion, pwedeng magkaroon ng heat stress and consequently, heat stroke. Now, it is very important that proper ventilation must be established in the workplace to avoid temperature-related illness. Now, another type of hazard is this. Actually, this is a humidifier, but what I want to mean here is atmospheric pressure. Now, atmospheric pressure is a type of hazard because when we are exposed to a high or low atmospheric pressure, it can result to decompression sickness called Caisson disease. Example of work na exposed to either too low or too high atmospheric pressure. Kunyari, deep sea divers. Di ba underwater, the pressure is mataas. Now, if underwater, the pressure is too high, what will happen is the nitrogen gas that is dissolved in our blood and tissues will come out. Okay? And when they come out, they form bubbles in our tissues. They form bubbles in our tissues as the pressure decreases. Now, when that happens, when bubbles formed in our tissues, it can cause so much pain. And then kung sa lungs naman na form ang bubbles, it can cause breathlessness, chest pain, then consequently it can cause headache, dizziness, coma, and worse, death. No? Kapag ganun ang nangyari from underwater, masyadong malalim ang nilangoy, tapos pag-aakyat, yun, magkakaroon ng decompression sickness. Now, another example, class, is sa airplane. Kabaliktaran naman. 'Di ba sa high altitude area is mababa ang pressure. Now, kung mapapansin niyo ang airplane, 'di ba nagkakaroon ng um, the cabin is pressurized first before the plane takes off. Because if wala na pressurize ang cabin and would take off rapidly in high altitude where there is low atmospheric pressure, that can still cause decompression sickness. Kabaliktaran nga lang yung process sa kung deep sea diver. Kasi kung sa deep sea diver, from high pressure to low pressure. Kung sa airplane naman, na diretso nag-take off, wala na pressurize ang cabin, the exposure is from low pressure to high pressure. Magkakaroon pa rin ng decompression sickness. And again, once decompression sickness occurs, the nitrogen gas in our blood and tissues will come out and will form bubbles. And once they form bubbles, yun na, complications ang mangyari. There is so much pain, dizziness, difficulty in breathing. Then pag hindi pa talaga yan ma-address, pwedeng mag-result into coma and worst, death. Now, another is the use of vibratory tools. Vibratory tools kasi these tools create vibration. Now, vibration, class, the vibration from these tools can be transmitted from the tool, then going to the hands, then to the arms. And the vibration can potentially damage our sensory nerves, can damage our muscles, our joints, and our bones. Now, example, in this picture here, saan ang ating mouse? In this picture here, okay, repetitive and prolonged use of this hand tool can result to the so-called vibration white finger. This vibration white finger is common among individuals who handle chainsaws, grinders, mga drills. The vibration coming from the tool will travel from the tool to the finger, and it can cause una niyan is tingling sensation pa, and then later pwede na mag-develop into numbness, and then consequently it may progress to deep tissue and deeper bone abnormalities. Now, meron din tayong tinatawag, class, na whole body vibration. Yung whole body vibration naman, ang effect niya is headache, motion sickness, stomach problems, pwede ring sleep disturbance and visual disturbance. So, example ng workers that may experience whole body vibration is yung mga off-road drivers. Kasi 'di ba, grabe yung lubak sa off-road. Okay? Another physical hazard is radiation. Radiation can either be ionizing or non-ionizing. Ionizing is more dangerous kasi ang ionizing radiation, it holds so much energy. And ionizing radiation, 'di ba mataas yung energy niya. This high energy can be absorbed by the body, and once absorbed by the body, it can cause significant cell death, or if not cell death, it can cause mutations. Now, ang non-ionizing radiation naman, on the other hand, it doesn't bear as much energy as as ionizing. So mababa lang ang energy ng non-ionizing radiation. Non-ionizing radiation cannot cause destruction of our cells and molecules. Only ionizing radiation can cause cell death and mutations. Lighting. Siyempre, kahit nga sa mga bahay natin, 'di ba? We are encouraged to work in a well-illuminated environment to avoid eye strain and vision problems. And lastly, noise. Well, basically, noise can be a significant pollutant, 'di ba? And exposure to high levels of noise can cause adverse health effects. Hindi lang humans ang affected with noise, but also other living organisms. Effect of noise, pwedeng loss of hearing. But aside from loss of hearing, it can also cause sleep disturbance and even cardiovascular diseases. Okay, so these are the different types of examples of physical hazards. Now, there are different diseases that may result because of the different physical hazards. So, example for heat, it can cause heat pyrexia, heat exhaustion, heat syncope, heat cramps, or burns, or pwedeng heat stroke, as I have mentioned earlier. Kung too cold temperature naman, it can cause hypothermia. Pwede rin makakause ng frostbites. Light, of course, light is directly associated with visual problems. Non or not properly illuminated environment can cause yan, occupational cataract. Atmospheric pressure, as I have explained kanina, Caisson disease, it happens when there is a rapid na exposure to high and low atmospheric pressure. So what happens in decompression disease is the nitrogen gas dissolved in our blood and in our tissue will come out and will form bubbles in our tissues. When bubbles are formed, it can cause so much pain. Pag sa lungs ang bubbles na na-form, it can cause breathlessness, difficulty in breathing, or pag sa brain, it can cause, una niyan, headache, dizziness. Pag hindi pa talaga ma-address yan, it can cause coma and even death. Now, to counter atmospheric decompression sickness, ang ginagawa sa pasyente niyan class is nilalagay siya sa isang compression chamber. So, sa compression chamber, there is adequate atmospheric pressure that will normalize the atmospheric pressure of the body. Now, aside from decompression sickness, atmospheric pressure faulty can also result to air embolism and explosion. Noise, as I have mentioned, it can cause hearing problems, auditory problems, can also cause cardiovascular diseases. Radiation, pwedeng makakause ng cancers. Leukemia is very common ang cancers when exposed to radiation. Pancytopenia class, pancytopenia is decreased number in all types of blood cells. So when we say pancytopenia, mababa ang red blood cell count, white blood cell count, and platelet count. Mababa lahat. Electricity, of course, it can cause burns and electrocution, which can result into shock. Okay, now let's proceed to the different chemical hazards. Okay, let's start first with heavy metals. Heavy metals, pwedeng example, lead, arsenic, cadmium, nickel, cobalt, mercury, yun yung pinaka-common na mga heavy metals. They are so-called heavy metals because basically they are heavy. They have high densities, no? They are actually naturally occurring in our environment. They are abundant in our environment. And what makes these heavy metals dangerous is that at low dosage exposure compared to other chemicals, they can already cause significant poisoning. So kahit mababa lang yung exposure natin sa mga heavy metals, pwede na sila makakos ng poisoning. Example, we heard of cases of lead poisoning in childhood. Childhood exposure to lead can significantly cause neurologic abnormalities and reproductive abnormalities. Kaya nga ngayon class, kung makita ninyo sa gasoline, 'di ba, unleaded na ang mga gasoline because of the reason na lead can cause neurologic problems particularly to children. Okay? And then we also have aromatic hydrocarbons. Okay? If you remember in your organic chemistry, examples of aromatic hydrocarbons are benzene, toluene, phenols. Okay? Before class, benzene is used in the histopathology section of the laboratory. But upon discovery na benzene is carcinogenic, so when we say carcinogenic, cancer-causing, no, so upon discovery na it is carcinogenic, the use of benzene in the histopath section was already discontinued. So kaya ngayon, wala ka na makikitang benzene sa histopath. Benzene was actually replaced by xylene instead, no? And in some laboratories, kung kailangan talaga nila gumamit ng benzene, regulated, highly regulated ang benzene. Okay? Now, if you can remember, eto, dito tayo, yung aking mouse. Okay. If you can remember in the news, last year ata yun, or the other year, di ba there were reported cases of lambanog poisoning? Di ba? Now, lambanog poisoning, ano ba ang problema nun before? Kasi 'di ba supposedly ang lambanog is ethanol. However, ang ginamit ng manufacturer nun is instead of ethyl alcohol, they make use of methanol. And it's a fact class that ingestion of methanol is seriously deadly. So, if not, it can cause, kung hindi man siya deadly, it can cause blindness and kidney malfunction. Kaya, yung sa mga tao na uminom ng lambanog na gawa from methanol, yun, they developed acute kidney failure. Yung iba naman sa kanila talagang namatay na. Okay? And then, we have asphyxiants. Okay? Ano yung asphyxiants? Asphyxiants can cause death by asphyxiation. Ano yung asphyxiation? Asphyxiation is suffocation. So, these types of chemicals can cause suffocation. So, typical example of an asphyxiant gas is our carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide intoxication. Carbon dioxide is considered deadly. Ito nga 'di ba yung notion nung sino nga yung governor ng Cebu, 'di ba? Sabi niya nga sa isang post na ayaw niya daw magsuot ng face mask kasi ang mai-inhale niya lang daw is yung kanyang own carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide can be poisonous. Kaya hindi siya nagsuot ng face mask in the public. Yun yung reason niya. Okay? Another type of asphyxiant, simple asphyxiants, examples are nitrogen, yan, CH4, chemical asphyxiants, carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is also considered silent killer. Silent killer because the patient wouldn't know that poisoning is already happening until suffocation is felt. Okay? Now, other examples na include, we have nitrogen, methane, hydrogen sulfide, We have hydrogen cyanide, um, sulfur dioxide, ito, and carbon bisulfide. Okay? Carbon bisulfide naman is considered as systemic poisoning. Systemic poisoning because it can affect systematically different organs of our body will be endangered if we are exposed to carbon bisulfide. Okay, so these are the chemical hazards. Okay, now let's proceed to um this. Class, when it comes to handling chemicals, if you can remember in your PMLS2, it is always advised to seek the MSDS of the chemical. Ano yung MSDS? The MSDS is the Material Safety Data Sheet. It is the package insert that contains all the information about the potential hazards of the chemical handled. The MSDS also contains guidelines on how to work safely with the chemicals, and even it contains protocols to apply for accidental spillage or hazardous exposure. So whenever a chemical is purchased, it always comes with an MSDS. Kung magwo-work na kayo sa laboratory tapos kayo yung na-assign sa purchasing, kailangan class yung mare-receive ninyo ng mga chemical sa lab is meron talagang MSDS. Huwag kayong mag-receive ng chemical or huwag kayong mag-purchase ng chemicals without the MSDS. Okay? And MSDS should be kept by the laboratory personnel in charge. Okay? And then, when it comes to dealing with chemicals class, we also have the so-called threshold limit value. Ano itong threshold limit value? What is this all about? Now, we have to be familiar with the threshold limit value because the threshold limit value is the maximum airborne concentration of a toxic substance to which a worker can be exposed over a period without suffering any harmful consequences. So, yung mga airborne or mga chemicals that are highly volatile, for example, kasi they become airborne, these chemicals have a threshold limit value. Itong threshold limit value na ito lang yung allowable limit value na dapat ma-expose ang isang worker para safe ang isang worker. Okay? Para walang adverse health effects that will result from the exposure. Now, TLV is expressed in terms of ppm or parts per million or pwede din milligrams per cubic meter. Okay, mg per m cube. Kasi nga, concentration ng chemical substances ang pinag-uusapan natin dito, class. Okay? Now, as the term states, threshold limit value, ito yung kino-consider na maximum limit of concentration of the substance na na-expose ang worker. At this concentration, walang adverse health effects na ma-experience si worker. Kumbaga, ito pa yung safe concentration na pwedeng ma-expose si worker without causing any illness or diseases. Okay? Klaro ba yon? Now, we have different types of threshold limit value. We have first the time-weighted average, the TLV-TWA. TLV-TWA is the average concentration of a chemical substance for a normal 8-hour working day or 40-hour week na yung workers are exposed to the chemical. So at this level, average level, safe pa naman and hindi pa hazardous for the employee that is exposed to the chemical. So again, this value can be located in the MSDS of the chemical. So dapat consult nyo talaga ang MSDS para alam niyo kung ano yung average, time-weighted average of the chemical. Now we have another TLV, which is the short-term exposure limit. Sorry, nakulangan ng L, or the STEL, short short-term exposure limit. The STEL is actually the maximum concentration na pwedeng ma-expose ang worker for a period of 15 minutes only. Again ha, the short-term exposure limit is the maximum concentration na pwedeng ma-expose ang worker for a period of 15 minutes only. Okay? And dapat yung exposure niya is not more than 4 times per day. Okay? Again ha, the STEL is the maximum concentration na pwedeng ma-expose si worker for a maximum of 15-minute duration. Okay? And dapat not more than 4 times ang kanyang exposure to the maximum concentration. Okay? Tapos, in between exposure class, dapat merong at least 60 minutes interval. Okay? Ito kasing STEL class are taken into consideration for those chemical substances na basically chronic ang effects nila. Okay? Although chronic ang effects nila, they can also cause short-term effects. Okay? So, both long-term and short-term ang effects ng mga chemicals na merong STEL. Okay? Example ha, bibigyan ko ng example. Kunyari, chemical X. The TLV-TWA of chemical X is 10 ppm. Okay? Yung tuwa niya is 10 ppm. Yung STEL niya is at, mali pala. Yung tuwa niya is at 5 ppm. Yung STEL niya is at 10 ppm. So, an average, 5 ppm, wala pang adverse health effects. At a maximum, 10 ppm, pwedeng ma-expose si worker. So, si worker, dapat ma-expose siya to chemical X between concentrations of 5 to 10 ppm. Okay? Average of 5, maximum of 10 for 15-minute duration exposure. Then, lalabas siya ng room. Tapos, 60 minutes interval. After 60 minutes interval, pwede ulit siya bumalik sa room. Tapos, 15 minutes duration lang ulit ang pwede niyang i-work with chemical X at a maximum concentration. Okay? Tapos, after the 15 minutes na exposure, lalabas na naman siya. And then, after 60 minutes interval, papasok ulit siya. So, ganun lang yung cycle class. Okay? 15 minutes exposure, get out of the room, and then 60 minutes rest. After 60 minutes, pwedeng bumalik sa room for another 15 minutes exposure. After the 15 minutes, labas naman, and then 60-minute exposure na naman. Okay? 60-minute interval na naman. And class, dapat yung exposure niya sa maximum concentration should not be more than 4 times in the entire shift of the worker. Okay? Klaro ba yon? Okay, the TLVC naman is the ceiling value. The ceiling value is the peak concentration of the substance na pwedeng ma-expose si worker. The TLVC are values that should never be exceeded at any time during the workday's shift. Now, pag ma-exceed ang TLVC value, surely it can already cause a hazardous health effects to the worker. Okay? Now, class TLV is not only applicable to chemical substances, but it is also applicable to other substances that can be airborne, that can be suspended in the air. So, can you think of a material na pwedeng maging airborne ang nature? Yes, you're right. These are dusts. Dusts can be considered hazardous because of their nature na airborne sila. They can be suspended in the air for a very long time. And once they are suspended in the air, pwede silang ma-inhale ng employee na na-expose to the dusts. And pag ma-inhale, pwedeng makakos ng lung disease. The lung disease caused by dusts is called pneumoconiosis. Okay? Okay, before we proceed, what is the longest word found in the English dictionary? Nope, it's not supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It is not. It is the Yes, you're right. It's pneumono ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis. It's a lung disease. Okay? And of course, it is a pneumoconiosis. Kaya merong coniosis sa pangalan. Um, Pneumono ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis is caused by inhalation of silica dusts from volcanic eruption. Naging ano ito, 'di ba? Nung pumutok yung nag-alboruto ang Taal just recently early this year in 2020. So pinagsuot ng face mask because of volcanic ash because the volcanic ash contains dusts na pwedeng ma-inhale ng mga tao. And once ma-inhale nila yun, it can cause, yun nga, pneumono ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis. Okay? Now, exposure to inorganic dusts, example, coal, it can cause anthracosis. So, common ito sa mga workers na yung work nila is sa uling, coal, mga coal miners. Silica, it can cause silicosis. Asbestos, as mentioned kanina, it can cause asbestosis. Organic dusts naman, example, cane fiber, it can cause bagasosis. Cotton dusts, it can cause biocinosis. Tobacco, it can cause tuberculosis. And grain dust can cause farmer's lung disease.